Alright, hello everyone. Welcome back to my Appliancer deck profile. Today we're looking at the Appliancer archetype, which is another super budget archetype, similar to Melfi's. But this one is Link monster based, and it makes some really interesting plays with Link ones to do with co-linking or non-co-linking and switching zones, which is, I think, can be really interesting. Alright, starting off the profile, we have 3 Appliancer Socket Troll, 3 Copy Buckle, and 3 Breaker Buckle. You need to be playing 3 of all of these because these are the only Appliancer main deck names, and it it's already hard enough to start with one of these, or with 2 of these, because that's what you need for the combo. So we're playing all 9 copies. Breaker Buckle doesn't really do anything, but it's still an Appliancer name, and technically a machine duplication target. Alright, moving on, we've got 3 Parallel Exceed. This one's a little bit more pricey at about 50 cents, but having an extender that can give you 2 extra monsters to link summon with is just too good to pass up. So even though it is a little funky and it can clog up your hand, it's still worth playing. Speaking of clogging up your hand, we've got 1 Codebreaker Zero Day. This is awful to see in your starting hand, but being able to play the Codebreaker package, which is not only incredibly cheap, but really explosive and powerful, it's worth the price. Alright, next we're playing a relatively large kaiju package. We're playing 3 Kaiju Slumber, and then for our big kaijus, we're playing 2 Jizukuru, because it's cheap and it's a machine. And then for our small kaijus, we're playing Radian, because it's like 10 cents these days since it was reprinted in Albaz Strike. But if you have something like a Godarla or a Gamma Seal, that would be even smaller than this. Go ahead and play that. Alright, next we've got 3 Appliancer Lyrical World, the best card in the deck. This searches your Appliancers, it allows you to retrieve them when you link summon, and it also allows you to switch their zones, which will come into play later with the linked monsters. We've got 3 Appliancer Reuse. This is just an in-archetype Reborn. It's technically searchable off of Appliancer Lyrical World, so that's kind of interesting. We've got an Appliancer Test. This is like a Soul Charge, but since Celtopus is only 2 zones, it's a maximum double Monster Reborn. So maybe in the future it'll be better, but currently we're only playing 1. Then we've got Appliancer Conversion. This is an interesting one because it allows you to swap the zones indirectly of your Appliancer monsters by banishing them and then resummoning them to different zones. And the reason we only play 1 of this is because it can add itself back to your hand by banishing another Appliancer spell trap from your graveyard. Alright, moving on, we've got 3 Machine Duplication. This is, again, just a great extender. If you start with something like a Breaker Bunkle and neither of the other ones, Machine Duplication can turn this 1 Breaker Bunkle into 3 and allow you to go into some other plays. So worth playing 3 of. Then, as I said, we have our 3 Kaiju Slumber. This is just great for breaking big boards. We've got 1 Terraforming because, again, Lyrical Worlds is the best card of our deck. So if we can play 4, we do. We got 1 Called by the Grave, just to protect ourselves from hand traps. 1 Monster Reborn, because it's a better copy of Appliancer Reuse. And we've got 3 Where Art Thou? This is a kind of interesting card that allows you to add a level 1 monster to your hand. It's not particularly good, but we need it for the consistency. If you're willing to spend a little extra money, you can play something like 1 for 1, but in this deck we're just playing the 3 Where Art Thou. And then we're playing 3 Warning Point. I just chose Warning Point because it's really cheap, but so is Lost Wind and Titanicider. So honestly, Lost Wind would be probably my pick here, but I just thought I would change it up for this one. This just any negation trap works here. Alright, moving on to the extra deck, we've got 2 Appliancer Celtopus. This is your main Appliancer that you go into first, and then you kind of plug in your other Appliancers into this. So this card is really good. It's unaffected by, or it can't be targeted by card effects or monsters' attacks, so non-targeted removal still gets over it. But it's still pretty annoying. It adds to your Appliancer's attacks, and also allows you to draw a card when a non-co-linked Appliancer is destroyed. Then for our ones, we've got 2 Appliancer Laundry Dragon. This is probably the best link one, because during battle phase, if it's co-linked, you can banish the opponent's monster, and if it's not, you can destroy it, and then inflict damage to your opponent equal to its original attack. So this is almost this deck's access code, except on a link one, because you don't take battle damage, this thing can just beat over anything, and it can deal a bunch of damage to your opponent. So this is kind of your game ender like access code. Then we've got 1 Propylion. This can set your opponent's attack to 0. That's about it. So that's pretty interesting. Vacuum Elephant can pop an opponent's monster. If it's co-linked, it doesn't need to discard a card to do it, but if it is not co-linked, you will have to discard a card in order to get that pop. Dryer Drake allows you to swap the zones of your Appliancers, and it can also gain 1,000 attack while it's linked, so this is pretty interesting, especially in conjunction with Laundry Dragon. And then we've got 1 Capascale. Probably the worst link monster, but it's still decent. You contribute it to summon another link appliance or link monster from your graveyard. So this is essentially another copy of any of these ones. It's just a little more convoluted. Alright, then we've got 1 of each of our code breakers. This is just a great engine that allows you to turn 2 link materials into 6, essentially. We've got our Nightmares. Everyone knows Phoenix and Unicorn. These ones are just good, and they're also pretty cheap. But Knightmare Gryphon is the real winner in this deck, because not only does it allow you to reset Appliancer Electric Lyrical World when it's destroyed, but it's just a really annoying floodgate that's fairly easy to make. And then similarly, just an annoying guy, Goki the Power Load Ogre, you can make off of your code breakers, and it's just a big towers that's unaffected, which is honestly pretty good to sit on in this deck. Alright, then for the 15th slot, I've actually got a couple of options. First is Baguska. You can technically make this off of Parallel Exceed, since it does become a 4. This can be good for stalling if you need a turn or two. Then you've got the Topologics. Bomber Dragon is interesting, but Zero Wars is probably better, since it banishes, which has synergy with Appliancer Conversion. And it's also incredibly cheap. Then if you're looking to spend a little bit more, about $1, Borreload Dragon is amazing, and for its price, it's probably the best value you're going to get for this slot. Then we've got Borrelsword Dragon. This is almost like as good as Access Code Talker. I mean, it's not Access Code, but for $5, it's a pretty good card. So if you're willing to spend, a little bit more on your deck, Borrelsword is definitely worth playing. And then I haven't tested this one, but I think Heat Soul could be kind of interesting in this deck, because, I mean, 2 extra draws every turn cycle is a lot of extra consistency to add to a fairly inconsistent deck. So although you would have to, put in a little more work in to actually use it and to get it working and synergizing with the deck, I think it could be an interesting option. Alright, I'm going to be back in just a bit with some test hands. Alright, we're back with some test hands, and we're starting off with a kind of interesting one. So we've got Appliancer Electric Lyrical World, so we're going to start with that. And that allows us to add an appliance of our choice. But what's interesting is we got to really think about which one we want to get, since we won't be able to do our full combo with Soccer Troll and Copy Buckle. But we do have Machine Duplication, so we could potentially get something like a Breaker Bunkle and save our other appliancers for later. And I'm not sure if that's the right thing to do here, because I think Soccer Troll is probably better in this circumstance, but you should probably at least think about that when you're, going through this. So I'm going to normal summon Soccer Troll, activate Machine Duplication. That's going to allow us to grab two more Soccer Trolls. Unfortunately, that does not proc this Sockatroll, since we have no more left in deck. But we can go into our extra deck and grab ourselves an Appliancer Celtipus. And that allows us to proc Electrolytical World, grabbing a Sockatroll. Then we can activate Sockatroll, putting it here. And now we've got a couple of options. So we could go into our Appliancer Link monsters, which are a little bit, they tend to be better going second. And they also kind of end the combo here. So I will say you could easily go into like a Laundry Dragon plus like a Dryer Drake, and that would be good. But I'm going to show you what you can do, like the full combo with your Codebreaker Virus Swordsman. So I'm going to link those two off, and you got to make sure it's co-linked. So you got to make sure it's in this zone. So we're gonna trigger it. It's gonna add 0 day. Then we're going to go to extra deck. We're gonna go Virus Berserker. Yep. And then I think which zone do we want to put this one in? I think we want to put it here. That's gonna allow us to get Virus Swordsman and 0 day. So we're gonna put 0 day over here. I'm not sure this matters too much. But then from here we've got a couple of options. What I think I'm gonna do is I'm gonna link off. Oh, sorry, not into Gryphon. I'm gonna link off into Goki the Power Load Ogre with these, just to make an annoying guy. And then we do have Monster Reborn, and this is something that we can't count on having. So what I would normally do is I would just link these two off into a Knightmare Gryphon over here, and that would give your opponent no link arrows to work off of. So they would have to make their own link monster, and you've just got this massive 3,000 attack guy here. But what we can actually do is we can Monster Reborn or Virus Berserker, and oops, that's just going to allow us to go into Gryphon without sacrificing our Celtipus. And that still keeps your opponents from getting their zones. And then I think we probably should activate this just to get ourselves. We can discard Radiant, we don't really need it. We're going to set back Monster Reborn just because it's a good card for later. And that'll also get us a draw, which is pretty good. And that's Appliancer Reuse, which actually is really, really good, because that allows us to extend even just a little bit more. We'll just put him here. And that actually gets a Socket Troll back in deck, which is just phenomenal. So that'll allow us to get a Laundry Dragon onto the board. So without starting with any Copy Balkles or Socket Trolls, granted we did have a pretty good hand, but ending on this crazy board, a 4200 Goki, your opponent can't activate Special Summon Monsters effects. They've got no link arrows to work with. This is a pretty good board. We've got Goki who's unaffected. So, and then we've got a Monster Reborn for next turn. So yeah, that was a pretty good example. All right, and lastly, I just wanted to show you that although the last combo was pretty nice, sometimes the deck just doesn't play out how you want it to. Sometimes you draw into 2 Kaijus and 0 day, a Kaiju Slumber, and a Appliancer Reuse. In fact, I would say maybe a quarter of the test hands I drew were just you couldn't do anything, and not necessarily an auto loss, but if your opponent has an explosive enough deck, there's often nothing you can do in that circumstance. And that's one of the failings of this deck. It's really inconsistent. You really have to draw your Appliancers, your Appliancer Electrolytical World, some kind of extender, something like that. And if you don't, there's not much you can do. But again, this is like a $10 to $15 deck all told. So I think even though it's not terribly consistent, it's still a really fun deck to play, and I would highly encourage anyone watching this video to absolutely build this deck and try it out and just have some fun with these cute little guys. Alright, with that said, thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.